Ohio gozaimasu, didn't hear you come in. Greetings and welcome to Ask Plutoburns with the Glasses. That's a very good question. Now, I'd have to say that my favorite Pluto on the show is definitely script-writing Pluto. For you see, script-writing Pluto is the one who gets all of the actual work done on this show. Not like that loser editing Pluto. I mean, what does he do? We get on camera, he cuts out the footage and puts it in order. He's so lazy. Yes. Yeah, that's enough of that joke. We're just gonna do this straight from now on. So, what was the first manga I ever read? Naruto. Yeah, see, the thing was, I got into manga because I was watching Naruto, the anime, and then I ran out of episodes to watch, so I was like, where can I find more? And then I found out that it was based on a comic, so I'm like, I'll just read the comic to find out what's happening next. And the manga was pretty good at the time I was reading it, and I've just never looked back. I discovered all the worlds of manga from that one show. Thank you, Naruto, for that. Well, I first encountered the world of video reviews from the Angry Video Game Nerd, and he led me to the Nostalgia Critic, and then all of the Channel Awesome people pretty much became my television crack for all 4 years of college. So, yeah, I could say the Nostalgia Critic, but the people who most directly inspired me were probably Yahtzee from Zero Punctuation, Todd in the Shadows, and Diamond Hagen. I really love everything those people do. Are you asking what I'd be reviewing other than manga, or what I'd do if I wasn't reviewing anything at all and just lived a life? Because the answer to the second question is, I don't know, have a job at an engineering firm? That's what I studied in college. If I could review anything else, it would be video games, but I quickly decided that that field was crowded enough. Well, manga and comics are essentially the same medium in terms of what you can physically accomplish with them. But, of course, because manga and American comics come from entirely different cultural backgrounds, manga has developed its own rules, per se, that don't have to be followed but are followed within the medium. And manga, I feel, has the advantage over comics because mangas can end. You make a story about Batman, it's just one of a never-ending trail of stories. And there's a lack of closure that has to come with that. You can't have the definitive ending Batman story because you want to make more Batman stories. And that's where I think mangas really benefit, in that you can tell really long, complicated, involved, multi-person, time-spanning stories that still end. You can still have a definitive, satisfactory conclusion. Another thing that sets manga apart from American comics is that in American comics, when you have a story, it's created by an author and an artist, and they work together for a while, and then it ends, and then someone else picks up that same character, at least in the realm of superhero comics. Whereas in manga, the writer and artist are usually the same person, and if they're not, they're usually a team of people who always work together. So what you have is you have a work that's got a lot of creative control from one singular vision. Yes, there's the editor, and then there's the backup artist, but you get that sense of one vision that you don't get quite so much from American comics. Alright, this one is kind of a double question. Two people asked essentially the same thing. What is a good place to start with manga? It depends on what you want to get into. Do you think you're going to want to be an action reader? Do you think you're going to want to go more for the romance, slice of life genre? So, for action, my recommendation is actually Bleach. Bleach gets bad at some point. Like, Bleach does not stay good, but the beginning of Bleach is really accessible, really action-packed, really funny. It's a good place to start to see what action mangas have to offer. Now for romance, you're gonna want to start with anything but High School Debut. I'm sorry, I know for the high school debut review I said it's a great place to start, but the thing is, high school debut is going to set your expectations of what romance mangas can be a little high. So maybe start with something like Special A, that's a good place to start. Beastmaster is a pretty good place to start. Kami-sama Kiss is a pretty good place to get started for romance. Lovely Complex is another good place to start if you want to get into romance. The thing with romance is that it's really... there's a lot of crap. There's really a lot of crap down there at the bottom. And you don't want to start with that stuff. But the really good stuff will set your expectations too high, because most of it falls somewhere in the middle. Now, if you want to get into more mature stuff, Hellsing is a good place to start. I quite like Dorohedoro. For sci-fi, I really can't recommend anything. Japanese sci-fi is way different from American-style sci-fi. And if you want something really, really Japanese, Vagabond is a really good historical samurai ninja period piece. If I had to guess, I'd say it's because of Nintendo. The console market was dead, and then Nintendo descended from on high in 1985 to raise an entire generation of children on their games. And a lot of the games were very poorly localized, so they were very Japanese, and the kids were like, what is this? What is all this stuff? What are all these Gundam references doing in this game? And it just... that curiosity about what this company was, and what all this stuff they were making cultural reference to, led to, I think, the anime boom of the 90s, and we've just never looked back from being obsessed with Japan. But I really think it goes all the way back to Nintendo raising a generation of 80s kids. Because their parents sucked. What made the red man red? Well, if we go from the evolutionary standpoint that humans originated in Africa, which means that if you trace it back far enough, everyone was black at one point. What happened was that when the Africans migrated to the north of Europe, where there wasn't as much sunlight, what happened was they weren't getting enough vitamin D. See, darker colored skin reflects more sunlight, which means you don't get as much vitamin D. So, in Africa on the plains, that's fine. There's tons of sunlight all the time. It doesn't matter if you're not getting as much as you could be, because you're never out of sunlight. But in Europe, in the winter, there's no sun! And vitamin D deficiency started to happen, so skin became lighter. So, the Native Americans, we're not too sure how they got there, probably through a land bridge between Russia and Alaska. There is a lot of sunlight in the continental United States during the summer, and they spent a lot of time outside, but in the winter there wasn't as much sun, so they had lighter skin than Africans, but not as light as Europeans because they didn't need to be inside all the time. So that's why the red man had a slightly darker skin tone than Europeans. You jerk. I don't really follow authors, as it were. I do read quite a few books, but I mostly just pick and choose based on what seems interesting. I really liked Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. I did read a lot of Eon Colfer, the guy behind the Artemis Fowl books, growing up. But if I had to pick one author who I followed simply because their name was attached to a work, it would be Agatha Christie, the one behind the Hercule Poirot novels, and the one who did this little beauty that I referenced in a former review. I'm not saying the name. I don't really listen to a lot of individual artists. I mostly just pick and choose songs from their albums as I like them. So I'd probably have to go with the last Imogen Heap album, Ram by Daft Punk, and some big band gold music from the 30s. I don't know what it is, but I really love stuff by like Glenn Miller where they've got like all the brass sections. This kind of music really appeals to me for just like sitting around and listening to it in the background. Probably Starfruit, because Starfruit is conveniently sized, delicious, and not nearly popular enough. Oh, my homie would have to be Haruna from High School Debut. I mean, come on, she looks like she'd be so much fun to hang out with, and can beat people up who piss me off. Well, I am neither married nor attached to anyone at the moment. Unless you're referring to the Urban Dictionary definition of waifu, in which case, screw you, Josh. I'd probably have to go with Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer. As a person who doesn't watch a lot of anime, I mostly don't care to see an anime adaptation, but the one genre that really does benefit from an anime adaptation is the action fighting genre, because fight scenes are just better when they've got fully articulated movement, and Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer had some really clever fights. Oh, favorite film could be anything depending on the day you ask me. It could be Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it could be The Mask, it could be Brazil if I'm feeling contemplative that day, it could be Guardians of the Galaxy. If I had to pick one of those, I'd probably go with The Mask, simply because I watched that till the DVD broke when I was like 5.
DVDs didn't exist when you were 5.
Oh my god, you're right. French fries. In terms of the episode that made me laugh the most, I'd have to go with Shadows of Mordor! But in terms of the episode that I actually appreciated the most, I'd have to go with the Saints Row 4 review, because that actually was kind of formative of my comedic style. Oh, gee, I wonder who that could be. There's so many choices. I'm gonna go with Jay. Now stop fishing for compliments, Josh. Well, thank you for joining me for this Q&A. Now I'm bored and I've answered all your questions, including the stupid ones. So I guess I'll see you all at the next manga review. Have a good day. Everything